Good morning, Councillor Katarina.
Good morning, everyone. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Terrific, thank you.
Good morning. Welcome to the Urban Planning Committee for October 13th. I'm going to call this meeting to order, and I'll do a roll call of the members. Councillor Banga,
All right, thank you. Let me
Councillor,
check my internet connection.
you're sounding okay at this point. Councillor Katarina,
Yes.
Councillor Henderson,
I am here.
thank you. And I see we have a few other council members. Could you just identify yourself?
Good morning, it's Andrew Knack here.
Thank you. Has anyone else joined us this morning?
No, that's it.
Okay, I don't see anyone. So thank you all. We'll jump right into the adoption of the agenda. Can I have a motion?
So moved,
So that's moved by Councillor Henderson.
as is, I think. I don't think there's any changes.
There were no changes. Okay. Can you please vote on the agenda? Please vote.
I didn't open my thing. Wait. I'm a yes. I just haven't opened up
Just
yet.
missing Councillor Katarina's vote.
Yes as well.
Thank you. Do we have all the votes, ma'am? Please display the vote. And that is carried. And now I'll go to Councillor Banga for the adoption of the minutes. Councillor Banga, are you able to move the adoption of the minutes?
I can move them if you want.
I think you might be frozen. Councillor Henderson has moved the adoption of the September 29th Urban Planning Committee meeting, so we'll please vote on the minutes.
Yes for me.
And that's all the votes. Thank you, and that is carried. I do not have any protocol items this morning. I'm going to go to select items for debate. Councillor Henderson?
Yeah, I've got a quick question on 6.3.
So you have a question on 6.3. You're going to need the presentation?
No, I don't need the presentation.
Okay. Any other selections? Seeing none, Councillor Banker, would you like to move all else? You need to unmute yourself, Councillor Banga. I hear him.
Yeah, I'll move that, but before that, my internet wasn't working quite well. Did somebody select 6.2?
No, did you need that one?
Yes, please.
Okay, and were you able to move 6.1?
Of course.
All right, so I think that's the only item we've have not selected is 6.1. Let's vote on that one. Please vote.
Yes.
Yes.
If you'd like to vote verbally, we can process it that way.
Yes.
That's all four, thank you. Okay, please display the vote. I believe that's carried unanimously. Thank you. It is. So, Councillor Banga, I'm assuming that we just passed 6.1. And Councillor Banga, was that a quick question on 6.2?
Yeah, I did have a couple questions on 6.2.
Okay. Would you like to go ahead, or did you need a presentation?
I wouldn't mind presentation.
Okay. Is there a presentation for 6.2? Or would you like to at least do some opening remarks?
There is a presentation for item 6.2. Jason, the presentation for item 6.2.
Yes, sorry.
We're at 6.2, if you'd like to go ahead.
Okay. Great. Good morning, Chair. Good morning, Committee.
Good
With
morning.
me, Jesse Bamford, our Branch Manager for Infrastructure Delivery. And he's joined on the call as well with Sam Elmotar, who's our Director of Transportation Infrastructure Delivery. So we have a brief presentation, essentially the same content from the report, but I'll turn it over to Jesse, and we'll answer any questions.
Good morning. There's only one mic over there. Good morning, councillors. Thank you for having us here today. I'm here as the acting branch manager for infrastructure delivery to present and help with any project-related questions that you may have. Next slide. 11 pedestrian bridges within the Mill Creek Ravine between 34th Street and 50th Street were described as having progressive deterioration, to the point where maintenance activities are unable to correct deficiencies and replacement was deemed required. The photo on the right is showing the deterioration that is typical to all bridges within this ravine. As the ravine is an important resource to the citizens of Edmonton, funding for the project was approved under the Transportation, Bridges and Auxiliary Structures Renewal Capital Profile as part of the 2019 to 2022 capital budget. Next slide. This image provides an overall map of the project site with the bridges noted throughout, 11 bridges. Next slide. As the project is occurring within the Mill Creek Ravine, a part of the North Saskatchewan River Area Redevelopment Plan, Bylaw 7188 requires City Council to approve an environmental impact assessment and the associated site location study. The EIA and SLS were completed by ISL Engineering and were submitted to the city's Urban Form Department in July of 2020, where it was approved internally following the city circulation in August of 2020. I'll be providing additional information on the EIA context that has been an important part of the EIA in the next few slides. Early in the project, we determined that the Mill Creek riverbed between 17th Street and 51st Street are not considered crown claimed by the province, a relatively rarity within the province providing ownership of the bed and shore to the city. This allowed for an expedited regulatory approval process. A thorough field assessment focusing on vegetation, fish and fish habitat, wildlife, hydraulics, historical resources was completed in the spring and summer of 2020. A rare plant survey was completed for all bridges, and no rare plants or rare communities were observed within the project area. A fisheries assessment and hydraulics assessment was completed for all the bridges and determined that the works were considered to be of low risk to fish and fish habitat. A formal Fisheries Act submission was completed, and Fisheries and Oceans Canada was provided sign-off on the project. The hydraulic assessment recommended to raise the bridge's heights to allow greater cross-sectional width, which will allow the bridges to handle greater flood flows than the current bridges. Next slide. Numerous wildlife species were observed during the site visit, and it is expected that the works can avoid impacts to wildlife through timing of construction, that is, to complete the majority of the work in the winter. A formal historical resource impact assessment, including field assessments, was completed for the bridge replacements, and no significant findings of historical natures were located. The assessment has been provided to the Alberta Culture for sign-off, who are currently reviewing the report. While the bridges have been optimized to the extent possible, tree and bush removal will be unavoidable. A formal tree preservation plan and restoration plan is being developed as part of the project and will be part of the contractor's requirements during this construction. Public engagement ability for this project is limited due to being a functional rehab project. However, the city will hold a public information session prior to the construction to ensure the stakeholders and nearby residents are aware of the construction schedule, trail closures, and associated with the works. The public information will be advertised by freestanding road signage placed at strategic locations and held in a yet to be determined local space where public gathering restricted due to COVID pandemic can be adhered to. The information presented at the public information session will also be available online at the City of Edmonton website. So our next steps, preliminary and detailed design have occurred through 2020, with the detailed design finalized in October of 2020. Construction is currently scheduled to start in the winter of 2021 and completed by the fall of 2021. Thank you for your time. If there's any questions.
Thank you, and Councillor Banga selected this item and has a few questions, so we'll go to Councillor Banga. Everyone else, please put in your request to speak. Councillor Banga.
Thank you. A couple of questions. Thanks for the presentation. The environmental impact assessment and the site location study, they were, I guess, administratively driven. Could somebody tell me why would that be needed?
Councillor Banga, it's Jason speaking. Any work that we do within the North Saskatchewan River Valley bylaw has a requirement to go through a level of environmental screening as part of that work. Depending on the nature of the work, it can range from, I think it's an internal project review to an environmental screening report to an environmental impact assessment. So based on the nature of the work described under this work, an environmental impact assessment and a site location study was the selected chosen review for this work. So effectively, anything within the North Saskatchewan River Valley bylaw is subject to some level of environmental screening as part of that work.
Okay, so out of 3.55 million that's dedicated to this project, what kind of costs are we talking about while doing those two studies?
You know, it's been a while since I've done this myself. I don't know if Jesse has this, but I believe that on average, probably around $40,000, an environmental impact assessment and site location study. It's a relatively lower amount, and it's basically part of the package of work that would describe the pre-development design and the getting the project ready for tender. So it outlines the construction methodology, the type, the level of impact with the wildlife. There's some monitoring that's done to ensure that there's no, specific sites of interest or more sensitive areas. But generally, I'd say for projects of this scope or scale, this is a reasonable level of investment to support the actual project.
Thank you. One more question is about the construction starts in spring 2021. And what would be the completion date round?
So, dependent upon approval, we would look to start advancing construction here in the winter of 2020 and complete in fall of 2021. This would have the minimal impact to the environment.
Okay. And so when we are communicating to people about using those trails and bridges, are they expected to use those old bridges at the same time, or would they be completely, demolished and then the new bridges would be built?
So as part of the public information sessions, we would be indicating what bridges would be closed. Some of the trail closures would be happening throughout to allow the rehabilitation on these bridges. The requirement for this to happen would be either we do it now or it becomes an issue in the future.
Councillor Banga, it's Jason again. I think two things I'd add is one, that up until the time that we actually have a contractor selected and they've shared information around their methodology and approach, I think that's a key input into how we would communicate what the proposed impacts would be as much as possible. The second is just based on the location of these as well, being that they are within a ravine within Mill Creek, obviously it'll be weather dependent as Mr. Bamford has already identified. Trying to get as much of the preliminary work done in the winter allows us to work in frozen ground conditions with less impact to the environment. Certainly during the spring when there's higher amounts of runoff and higher water table, that will limit some of the impacts, limit some of the construction activity as well. So it'll be variable depending on the weather, and iteratively as those changes happen, we will be communicating each of those changes as they happen, both on the website that's identified in the report, as well as we'll have signs up on the trails as well to inform residents in the area. Thank
you. That was all my questions, and I will move the recommendation pending any other questions from the committee members.
I do not see any other questions, so I'll take that motion. Would we please vote now? And that has been carried. Thank you very much. Now we're going to item 6.3, and Councillor Henderson selected that, so I will go to him. Did you want a presentation or
No,
questions only?
I'm fine, just questions.
Questions only. So, Councillor Henderson.
I was encouraged by the report, except for the timing. And I'm just wondering, particularly for the 100th Ave piece, if I'm reading this correctly, it'll be the end of the decade before we get to it. And that, given the fact that there's 2 or 3 buildings going up, there's another one that we're going to be, I think, looking at shortly. It gives me a bit of concern, in part because I think what the community wanted was not for us necessarily to do it, but to know what was going to be done so that whatever was happening with those buildings could adapt to it.
Councillor Henderson, really the timing is being driven by the neighborhood renewal program and the ability for us to weave all of the things that are happening together. And so that is what is driving the timing.
I'm just wondering if there's other solutions. I don't know if there's, even in doing the design first, because if we're going to see a lot of construction happening along there, if we're going to be approving a lot of buildings that they're all DCs, it seems to me there's an opportunity there to build into their design some of what we're wanting to do, but it's impossible to do that if we don't know what the end product is going to look like.
We can explore options to accelerate that with our partners in IIS if there is an opportunity to perhaps look at doing the design earlier because of the number of DCs, but I don't have an answer today. That would be a piece of work that Jason and I would have to
I would really,
look at.
it was the reason for this motion to begin with. It wasn't a request to necessarily do the land, but to recognize we were approving a whole bunch of stuff in there, and that was an opportunity to at least understand, and we've done that elsewhere. We've done that on 109th. There's other places where we've at least understood the design piece so that we can take advantage of construction that's happening there, not by us, but by others, and make sure that it fits. So that, really is that timing piece that I think, because otherwise we're 10 years away and it'll all be done. Those buildings will all be constructed and it'll be over.
Well, I think anytime we come into a roadway and have planned rehabilitation, we do plan as part of our preliminary work to do engagement, to identify and capture opportunities where possible within the scope of the funding that's available through the renewal program. If we do identify that there are attributes of growth elements that need to be captured as part of that, we typically try to bring those forward to council as part of the package when we complete the planning and design for that work.
Yeah.
But I think a similar example is the 101st Avenue work and by Terrace Road and
Yeah.
That's a similar type of approach I think that we would like to emulate here if council wanted to be able to put forward a funding package specifically for planning and design. That would have to be examined along with all the other priorities as part of the
I just think otherwise we miss an opportunity for work that doesn't have to be done by us, which ultimately saves us money. If those buildings are up and have made choices, and not respond to this. And that, my memory is from the public hearing on a couple of those buildings, that was the real thing the community was asking us for. They wanted to make sure that what we were building made sense, or what the private sector was building actually made sense in terms of what that streetscape was going to look like. And it could probably be fairly high level. I mean, the 101 Avenue one originally was fairly high level, was done largely by the community. But I think we miss a window if we don't. And then my one other question around that was, it's again waiting 10 years to actually connect the two ends of the active transportation, the bike infrastructure, and there seems also a long time to wait for a pretty significant missing link. And I'm wondering, not doing a permanent solution, but doing a kind of temporary solution like we did along the other piece of 100th Avenue, whether or not that could happen earlier. Because I think the width is there. There used to be 2 lanes, which we've now got down to 1, so there must be width to just pop in some of the kind of concrete pieces that we did, which I don't remember being hugely expensive. Both ends of that link are bike lane, and there's just that one gap. And again, waiting for 10 years to that seems to me a long time to wait for what's a pretty vital link. So not a permanent solution, but doing something similar to what we did on the downtown grid, which is a theoretically temporary, movable solution. I'm wondering if we could look at that as well.
We could take that away and take a look at to see if there is something specific that we could do there, that could happen prior to the neighborhood renewal program coming in.
Yeah, because we're not even starting planning in the neighborhood renewal until 2027 or 28, I think, if I read the report correctly.
2023 is when it would start.
The planning starts?
Yeah.
Okay, all right.
Based
Well, that's a
on-
little bit better than, I thought it was 27 or 28 before we actually did the planning, and then a couple more years after that to do the work.
No, we've
Okay.
made adjustments to the neighborhood renewal program so that we're doing the planning upwards of 3 years in advance. So the construction's
I
planned.
must have misread the report, because I thought it said we started the planning in 2027.
Thank you.
Yeah.
And I'll go to committee members, and then I'll go to external. So I have Councillor Banga, then Councillor McKean.
Thank you. I only got two questions. One is, in the report, it's mentioned that 2-3 buildings are coming up and one is yet to come, or is it going to be before us pretty soon? Is that how we decide? Because at this point, we haven't approved that.
Councillor Banga, are you asking about the approvals through the public hearing process?
Yeah, I mean, before we approve the zoning or the new building, it is usually, we don't consider what's going to be happening in the future. I mean, that next, I guess rezoning would be going to be. Do we take that kind of future expectations in, I guess, in our considerations?
Councillor Banga, when we're doing neighborhood renewal, I know we definitely look at what's there today as well as what the future potential is in terms of the plans and what the potential rezoning could be in that area when we're looking at a future design.
Okay, and the other question is when we do those these kind of things and we base something on the future that is going to be coming before us, does that put any extra expectations for the council to approve that zoning?
Councillor Bang, I wouldn't say that puts expectations on council to approve the zoning, but some of these towers already are already been through the public hearing process and are approved towers. I don't think that this is setting precedent, if that's what you're concerned about.
Yeah, no, I was talking about the one that is going to be coming before us, or maybe I understood it wrong.
I understand the one that's coming up in public hearing. I don't think that by council receiving this report for information, it ties you to the public hearing process. A public hearing process, you go in with an open mind and make a decision based on what you hear on that day.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor McKean.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So I know that as we worked through the Jasper Avenue design in Oliver, there was a lot of work with the developers of towers. And so I wanted to support what Councillor Henderson was saying earlier about a concern of making sure that conceptually, at least, the towers that are going in and the design could fit with a new design of 100th Ave. Do you think that is all possible, that conceptually, with, given the new city plan and everything else, that we would have ideas, broadly speaking, high level, of what that corridor would be expected to do in coming years?
Councillor McKeon, I think what we've seen is that the corridor is an important corridor for the community and for Oliver in general. So I think that's why we've brought forward this approach here, that we want to be efficient and effective in the way that we plan our resources, but also from Councillor Henderson's questions here today, as well as from your questions, to take away, to look at if there's anything that we can do in advance of the neighborhood renewal program to accelerate that process, and then bring forward any funding requirements as a result of that to council for deliberations through budget processes.
Thank you. And I think the report, which I appreciate, by the way, very much, didn't mention the Beaverbrook Tower on 110th Street, which is, I think, 20-ish stories, and then the Westridge Tower on 12th Street, which is about 20 plus stories. So we're getting a lot of density added there. And I know the community, and I think people moving in too, would be much less car oriented. Likely, there's more of that anyway. So I'm really intrigued with Councillor Henderson's question about using temporary structure to create a bike lane and to create a link between Victoria Promenade and the 110th Street bike way, but also across 109th Street on 100th Ave. Do you think, would committee have to ask for a report to come back on that? Or I know you said you would take it away, but is that something that could be done? First of all, the report done relatively inexpensively, and then the structure itself be done relatively inexpensively?
Sorry, Councillor, could you just clarify, sir, this is Sean Bowley speaking, the senior planner who prepared the report. You are asking if a plan to create temporary bike infrastructure could be prepared rather easily, is that correct?
Yeah. I guess there's two questions. Having a look at it and reporting back, because there would be a cost to it and council would have to make that decision. So A, doing a report, looking at the feasibility, and two, then advancing some sort of temporary structure along 100th Avenue to create a bikeway.
Okay. In speaking with the folks in administration who prepared the bike plan, they indicated that 100th Avenue is of particular interest and is part of the bike plan. However, given uncertainty around how the bike plan might proceed and be implemented, it was thought that the best opportunity was through neighborhood renewal. There has been some thought given to how bike infrastructure could be addressed along this route. And so I guess the best answer I can give you is that we have given it some consideration already and could probably bring back a report on possibilities relatively soon. That said, the bike plan was not focused on temporary solutions, but on more permanent infrastructure.
Councillor McKeon, I would suggest that we've got a report coming forward, I believe in Q1, on bike plan implementation. And so why don't we, I will commit to address that as part of that report.
Ms. McCabe, that is fantastic. Thank you very much. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. And Councillor Henderson?
Just a quick question. So do you need a motion for that, or are we good?
We don't need a motion
Okay,
for that.
that's fine. Thanks.
Thank you. Then I see no other questions. Councillor Henderson, are you happy to?
I'll move receipt for information.
Thank you. So that has been moved. Please vote. Display the vote. And that item is carried. Thank you. That's all the items on the agenda. I did neglect to ask for any councillor inquiries, but I was not aware of any. And are there any notices of motion? Seeing none, then we are adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.